"You were the biggest mistake I ever made," Carol said, her voice cold enough to freeze the air between us. I looked at her, really looked at her, the woman I had once promised the world to. Her eyes, once so full of dreams we whispered into. The dark now held nothing but regret. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask why. I didn't fight for an explanation. I just laughed. Not because it was funny, not because it didn't hurt, but because somewhere deep inside me, something had snapped, so clean and so final that laughter was the only thing left. In that moment, the past flashed before me, the nights I stayed up fixing the kitchen sink. She broke and didn't bother to tell me about, the double shifts I pulled to afford the vacations she bragged about to her friends, the way I had bent myself into 1,000 different versions of good enough until I couldn't even recognize myself anymore. And still, I was her mistake. I left the house that night with nothing but my car keys and a backpack slung over my shoulder. I didn't touch the wedding photos. I didn't leave a note. I just walked past the life we had built like it was nothing more than ashes already scattered in the wind. The engine of my car rumbled to life, but for a while I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, feeling the kind of tired that no amount of sleep could ever fix. Somewhere between the first betrayal and the last goodbye, something inside me had been hollowed out, leaving nothing but an echo. As I pulled away from the curb, I glanced one last time at the house. Carol stood at the window, arms crossed, face unreadable. She didn't try to stop me. She didn't even flinch. It was in that moment I realized this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of something else entirely. Something stronger. Something colder. Something that would never beg for love again. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of what came next. I felt ready. I wasn't born into money. I didn't inherit a fortune. I didn't have a famous last name. Everything I had, I built with my own 2 hands. When I first met Carol, she wasn't impressed by any of that. She wasn't the type to fall for rough hands or oil-stained shirts. She liked luxury. She liked the shine of things, the sparkle, the high gloss of life. But somehow, against all odds, she chose me. Or maybe it's better to say she chose the idea of me, the man she thought she could shape and polish into something worthy of standing beside her. At first, it felt like a dream. Carol was the kind of girl who walked into a room and changed the air without saying a word. Her laughter was a melody that made strangers turn their heads. She had this way of looking at you, like you were the only person in the world, and for a guy like me who spent most of his life being invisible, it was intoxicating. I worked harder after I met her, pushed myself more, opened a second shop, took night courses in business management even when my eyes burned from exhaustion. Every time I hit a new milestone, I watched her smile grow a little wider, and I thought, this is it. This is love. When I asked her to marry me, she said yes with tears in her eyes. She said she believed in me. She said she didn't care about the money, the status, the world we came from. She said she wanted forever. I believed her. We married, in a small ceremony under a sky so blue it hurt to look at it. She wore a dress that shimmered like sunlight on water, and I thought I had won the kind of happiness most men only dream about. But forever has a way of fading faster than you think. The first cracks were small, little things you could almost ignore. She didn't like the neighborhood we lived in. She didn't like the old pickup truck I refused to trade in. She hated the smell of motor oil that clung to me no matter how hard I scrubbed. She wanted more. She wanted better. She wanted things I couldn't give her, at least not fast enough. I didn't realize it at the time, but every sacrifice I made, every part of myself I shaved away to fit the mold she wanted, only made her lose respect for me. I thought I was proving my love. She thought I was proving my weakness. Carol wasn't a cruel person, not in the way people imagine villains to be. Her cruelty was softer, quieter, dressed in disappointment and sighs. It was the kind of cruelty that didn't leave bruises on your skin but left cracks in your soul. I thought if I just tried a little harder, held on a little tighter, I could fix it. But love isn't a project. It's not something you can build alone. Somewhere along the way, without either of us noticing, Carol started slipping away. She stayed out later. She smiled less. She stopped laughing at my jokes. Conversations that used to flow like rivers dried up into awkward silences, and then Scotty entered the picture. He was everything I wasn't. Polished, witty, dripping with a kind of casual confidence money breeds into people from birth. They worked together at some upscale consulting firm Carol joined after we married. At first it was just business dinners, weekend projects, late-night emails. Then it was lingering looks across the room, inside jokes I wasn't part of, cold shoulders when I asked too many questions. The night I found Scotty's name lighting, up her phone after midnight, I knew it was over, but I didn't confront her. I didn't scream or accuse or demand explanations, because deep down, I understood something even more painful than betrayal. Carol wasn't mine to lose anymore. She had been drifting away for a long time. I was just too stubborn, too hopeful, too blind to admit it. The day she said those words, called our marriage her biggest mistake, wasn't the day our love ended. It was just the day I finally stopped lying to myself about it. I had loved Carol. God, how I had loved her. I loved her enough to change, enough to hurt, enough to shrink myself into something small and convenient just to make her stay. But no amount of love could fill the void inside her, and no sacrifice could erase the disappointment in her eyes when she looked at me. The Mike she married wasn't good enough, and the Mike she made wasn't a man she could love. So I walked away, not because I didn't love her anymore, but because I finally realized love isn't supposed to feel like slow death. It's supposed to feel like life. And for the first time since I met Carol, I was ready to start living again, even if it meant doing it alone. It started with a message I wasn't supposed to see. I was fixing Carol's laptop one evening, something I had done countless times before, when an email popped up on the corner of the screen. It was from Scotty. The subject line was short, careless. Miss you already. I froze, hands hovering above the keyboard, my stomach knotting itself tighter with every breath. I clicked it open. Inside was a trail of messages, casual at first, then intimate, then undeniable. Talks of secret dinners, shared rides home, hotel rooms booked under fake names, plans made without me, laughs shared behind my back. Carol's responses weren't full of regret or hesitation. They were eager, warm, familiar in a way she hadn't been with me for months. I closed the laptop slowly, every movement deliberate, as if carefulness could make it hurt less. She came home a few hours later, keys jingling, her heels clicking on the tile floor. She kissed my cheek absent-mindedly, talked about her day like everything was normal, like she hadn't just gutted me without lifting a finger. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask her why. I simply watched her, watched the way she moved around the kitchen, the way she smiled at her phone more than at me, the way her eyes lit up when she thought of someone else. And in that quiet, I realized something far worse than betrayal had taken root between us. It wasn't just that she didn't love me anymore. It was that she didn't even see me anymore. That night, after she fell asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how two people could share a bed and still feel 1,000 miles apart. I thought about confronting her, demanding answers, begging for honesty, but what would be the point? Truth wasn't something you could pull out of someone if they didn't want to give it, and I was tired of bleeding for a love that didn't even recognize me. I moved out the next morning, packed quietly, methodically while she slept. Left my key on the kitchen counter. Didn't even leave a note. I figured she would notice I was gone the same way she had noticed everything else lately. Too late to matter. I rented a small apartment on the other side of town. It was nothing like the house we shared. The wallpaper peeled in places. The water pressure was weak. The heater rattled when it turned on. But it was mine. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to pretend. I poured everything I had into the garage, took every repair job I could get my hands on. I stayed late. I worked weekends. I kept myself busy enough to forget the echo of her name in my chest. It almost worked, until Shannon walked through the door one rainy afternoon. She hadn't changed much. A little older, maybe, a little more worn around the edges, but her smile was the same. Warm, easy, the kind of smile that didn't ask anything from you but somehow gave you everything you needed. We talked like old friends who hadn't seen each other in years but somehow picked up right where they left off. She didn't ask about Carol. She didn't poke at old wounds. She just stood there, umbrella dripping on the cracked floor, and told me about her new job, her terrible boss, the cat she rescued from a grocery store parking lot. For the first time in months, I laughed without forcing it. For the first time in months, I remembered what it felt like to be seen. She started visiting more after that. Sometimes she brought food. Sometimes she just sat with me while I worked, flipping through old car magazines and humming under her breath. It wasn't love. Not yet. It was something softer, quieter, like the first rays of sun after a long, brutal winter. Something small inside me stirring, cautious but curious. But just as I started to think maybe I could breathe again, Carol came crashing back into my life. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was elbow deep in an old engine when I heard the familiar sound of heels on concrete. I looked up and there she was, standing in the middle of my shop like a ghost I had forgotten how to bury. She didn't look angry. She didn't look ashamed. She looked desperate. "Mike," she said, her voice cracking around the edges. "I made a mistake." I wiped my hands on a rag and said nothing. She stepped closer, the scent of her perfume, the one I used to love, now making my stomach turn. Scotty. He wasn't who I thought he was. I was stupid. I was selfish. I see that now. I just want to fix things. Please. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized the most painful truth of all. I didn't want her back. Not because the pain had faded, but because I had finally realized my own worth. The Mike standing here now wasn't the boy who had begged for scraps of affection. He was a man who had been broken, battered, abandoned, and was still standing. Carol must have seen it too because her voice dropped to a whisper. "Please, Mike, just come home." I thought about all the nights I had spent waiting for a woman who never really wanted to be there. I thought about Shannon's smile, about the way she made even the rain feel warm, and for the first time since everything fell apart, the choice was easy. I tossed the rag onto the workbench, wiped my hands clean, and said the only thing that mattered. "I already am home." I told Carol no, but it didn't mean I walked away without scars. Nights were the hardest. Lying in that cramped apartment, the old ceiling fan ticking away the hours, I found myself replaying every moment with Carol on a loop I couldn't turn off. The first time she laughed at one of my terrible jokes. The night she fell asleep on my shoulder in the middle of a movie. The way she used to look at me like I was her whole world. Had it all been fake? Had I been so easy to discard because I was just a pit stop on her way to something better? Some nights anger kept me awake. Burning, searing anger that made my hands shake and my throat tighten until it hurt to breathe. I hated her. I hated what she had done to me. I hated that no matter how much I tried to hate her, some small, stupid part of me still missed her. Other nights, it was sadness. A deep, hollow kind that didn't even bring tears, just a heavy weight in my chest that made it hard to move. And sometimes, worst of all, it was guilt. I would wonder if maybe I hadn't been enough. If maybe all the love and effort I had poured into us had been flawed from the start. If somehow, some way, I had pushed her away without even realizing it. I hated how she still lived inside me, like a ghost I couldn't exorcise. I buried myself in work, pushing my body until exhaustion was the only thing stronger than the ache in my heart. I told myself it was getting better. I told myself I was moving on. I told myself I didn't need anyone. Then Shannon would show up, bringing a sandwich and a smile, sitting across from me at the shop like she belonged there. She never pushed, never pried. She just showed up, again and again, like an anchor I didn't realize I was drifting toward. But even with her, the fear clung to me. What if I wasn't good enough for her either? What if she saw the broken, bitter pieces of me and decided I wasn't worth the trouble? I kept my distance, even when everything in me wanted to close it. Some days, I caught her looking at me when she thought I wasn't paying attention, a soft, worried look that made my chest tighten. She never said anything about it. She just stayed. One night after the shop closed, we sat on the hood of my truck watching the rain smear the city lights into a watercolor blur. Shannon pulled her knees up to her chest, hugging them tightly, her hair curling damply around her face. "You ever feel like," she said quietly, "no matter how hard you try, you're always stuck in the same place?" I swallowed hard. "Yeah," I said, "every damn day." She smiled sadly, like she knew exactly what I meant. Like maybe she was carrying her own invisible scars, too. I wanted to reach for her then. I wanted to tell her how much it meant to me, just her being there. How her quiet presence had stitched pieces of me back together that I thought would stay broken forever. But fear held me back. Fear of ruining something pure. Fear of dragging her into the wreckage that was my heart. Instead, I shoved my hands into my pockets and stared at the shimmering puddles on the ground. We sat there for a long time, the silence between us saying everything we didn't dare put into words. Later, after she left, I lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, thinking about what it would feel like to let someone in again, to trust, to hope, to risk. The thought terrified me. It also made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Carol's betrayal had burned me down to ash. But Shannon, she made me think maybe, just maybe, there was something worth rising for again. I didn't know if I was ready. I didn't know if I ever would be, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to try, even if it scared the hell out of me, even if it meant stepping off the ledge with nothing but blind faith to catch me. Because maybe the point wasn't finding someone who promised they would never hurt you. Maybe it was finding someone who would stay even after seeing every broken, ugly part of you, and maybe, just maybe, Shannon was that someone. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain, letting the hope settle into the cracks inside me like the first green shoots after a wildfire. It wasn't much, it wasn't a miracle, but it was a beginning. And right now, that was enough. The next few days moved like slow poison through my veins. I stayed alert. I stayed ready. But no matter how tightly I gripped the wheel, life had a way of skidding out of control. It happened late one night after I closed up the garage. The air was thick and heavy, the kind of humidity that sticks to your skin and makes the world feel smaller, meaner. I stepped out into the alley behind the shop, heading to my truck. That's when I heard it, the scrape of shoes against gravel, too fast, too close. I turned just as the shadow lunged. Scotty. He looked worse than I remembered. His clothes rumpled, eyes bloodshot, a desperate kind of madness clinging to him like sweat. "You took everything from me," he hissed. His breath reeked of alcohol, anger curling his lip into a snarl. "Carol, my job, my reputation. You think you're better than me?" I didn't answer. Because in that moment, talking didn't matter. He swung first, wild and sloppy. I dodged, instinct and anger sharpening my reflexes. His fist whistled past my jaw. He stumbled forward, off balance, and I caught him with a hard shove to the chest. He crashed against the wall, but he wasn't done. He came at me again, teeth bared, swinging wildly. This time, I didn't dodge. I caught his arm, twisted it behind his back, and slammed him into the brick hard enough to knock the breath out of him. He gasped, struggling like a trapped animal. "You." "Followed Shannon," I said, voice low and steady in his ear. "You scared her. You hurt her." I pulled him back and slammed him again, harder. "If you ever come near her again," I said, each word sharp and cutting, "I'll break you so badly no one will be able to put you back together." He thrashed uselessly, cursing, spitting, but I didn't let go. I held him there, forcing him to feel it. The helplessness, the fear, the reality that he wasn't the one in control anymore. "You think you're a victim?" I said. "You're just a sad, pathetic coward who can't stand the fact that someone else got up after you knocked them." "Down." I shoved him down into the dirt. He stayed there, gasping, glaring up at me with pure hate in his eyes. I didn't care. Hate me, fear me. Stay the hell away. That was all I wanted. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have heard the commotion and called them. I didn't wait around. I turned and left him there, bleeding and broken in the dirt where he belonged. When I got back to my apartment, Shannon was waiting. She must have seen something in my face because she didn't ask what happened. She just opened the door wider and let me in. I stood there for a long moment, soaked in sweat and rain and the lingering stink of violence. She walked up to me slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. Her hands were small and sure as they touched, my face tracing the bruises blooming across my cheekbone, the cuts on my knuckles. "You're hurt," she whispered. I shook my head. "It's nothing." But the way she looked at me made something inside me shatter. I tried to pull away, tried to retreat into the silence and anger that had kept me alive all these years. But Shannon didn't let me. She stepped closer, arms wrapping around me, pulling me into a hug so fierce, so real, that for a moment I couldn't breathe. And then the dam broke. Everything I had been holding in, the fear, the anger, the pain, the guilt, came, pouring out in a flood I couldn't stop. I sank to my knees right there on her living room floor, burying my face against her stomach, trembling like a man drowning in air. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so damn sorry." She knelt down with me, cupping my face in her hands, forcing me to meet her eyes. "You don't have to apologize for surviving," she said, voice thick with unshed tears. "You don't have to carry all of it alone." I closed my eyes, pressing my forehead against hers, breathing her in like a man starved for oxygen. For the first time in years, I let someone see me. Really see me. Not the man who fixed cars. Not the man who got left behind. Just me, raw, broken, human. We stayed like that for a long time. Two shattered souls holding on to each other in a world that never stopped breaking things. When I finally pulled back, I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't afraid of the wreckage I carried. She wasn't running. Neither was I. Later that night, we sat on her couch, wrapped in a blanket, the storm still raging outside. Shannon rested her head on my shoulder, her fingers laced through mine. "I was scared," she said softly. "I didn't want to be another thing you regretted." I turned my head, kissing the crown of her hair. "You could never be a regret," I said. "Not you." She looked up at me, her eyes shining, and for the first time, I realized what real love looked like. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, it wasn't about shining brighter or climbing higher or fitting someone else's dream. It was about showing up, about fighting when it mattered, about standing beside someone, even when everything inside you screamed to run. I kissed her then, not out of desperation, or fear, or loneliness, but out of something deeper, something real. And for the first time, it didn't feel like falling. It felt like flying. The storm howled outside, tearing at the world. But inside that small apartment, inside those walls built, from quiet hope and stubborn survival, I finally found peace. Not the kind of peace you find when everything goes right. The kind you find when everything goes wrong and you're still standing anyway. Shannon curled into my side, her breathing soft and steady, and I realized something else. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, truly living, with scars and bruises and all the mess that came with it, and I wouldn't trade it for anything, not even the perfect life Carol once promised me. Because this imperfect, beautiful, broken thing Shannon and I were building together was more real than anything I had ever known. And this time, I wasn't going to let it slip through my fingers. Not ever again. Some scars never really heal. They just become a part of you. In the months that followed, Shannon and I built a life out of the wreckage. It wasn't perfect. Some nights I still woke up from dreams where Carol's voice echoed, sharp and cold. Some days, anger curled inside my gut when I remembered Scotty's sneer. But Shannon was there. She was there when I flinched awake from nightmares, her hand steady on my chest. She was there when the old doubts whispered that maybe I wasn't good enough, her smile cutting through the noise. She didn't try to fix me. She just stood with me in the rubble, without flinching. That was all I ever needed. Kept running the garage, slowly expanding it into something bigger. A second location opened on the west side of town, a few more employees, a few more customers who came in just because they heard someone honest still existed in the business. I wasn't rich. I wasn't flashy, but I was free. And that was something no amount of money could buy. But even as my life steadied, one thing still gnawed at me. Scotty was still walking free. Last I heard, after the police questioned him about the attack behind the shop, he had skipped town. But he wasn't hiding. No, Scotty had slipped back into the shadows of a different city, conning a new set of victims, smiling that same empty smile. I could have let it go. I almost did. But something in me, the part that remembered every sleepless, every wound he helped carve into my life, refused to let him walk away clean. Justice was never going to come from the system. People like Scotty always knew how to slip through the cracks. So I made a decision. It took months, planning, patience, watching and waiting. I learned where he worked, some sleazy real estate office laundering dirty money through shady deals. I learned who he trusted, who he owed, who would turn on him for the right price. I found the cracks in his new empire, and then, slowly, carefully, I widened them. I sent anonymous tips to the authorities. I planted just enough rumors in the right places. I passed along evidence to the competitors he had screwed over, the ones who were just waiting for a reason to tear him apart. By the time the first raid hit his office, Scotty was already drowning. Fraud charges, embezzlement, connections to organized crime. He couldn't talk his way out this time. He couldn't charm or bully his way clear. He was cornered, and when they finally arrested him, when his face splashed, across the news in blurry mugshots, I felt no triumph, no gloating, only the clean, quiet satisfaction of a wound finally scabbing over. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about closure. It was about knowing that for once the bad guy didn't get to ride off into the sunset laughing. He got exactly what he deserved, and I didn't have to lift a single finger in violence. I simply let him destroy himself, the way people like him always do. When the news broke, I was sitting on the porch of Shannon's new house, the one we bought together. She came outside holding 2 cups of coffee, her hair messy from sleep, her smile soft and sleepy. She handed me a cup and sat beside me, pulling her knees up to her chest. "Looks like karma finally clocked in," she said, smirking over her mug. I chuckled. Took her long enough. We sat there sipping coffee as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the world in soft gold and pink. The old Mike, the one who thought love was about sacrificing yourself until there was nothing left, was gone. The Mike sitting here now knew better. Love wasn't supposed to be chains. It was supposed to be a hand pulling you back when you thought you were lost. It was supposed to be someone who saw every cracked, battered piece of you and said, "You're enough." And somehow, after everything, I had found that. In Shannon, in myself. Later that day, we packed up the truck for a fishing trip, the same one we had talked about for months but never made time for. Big Orange, the scrappy cat we adopted from a shelter, perched on the dashboard like he owned the place, swishing his tail with imperious pride. On the drive, Shannon laughed as she scrolled through her phone. Someone started a petition online to build a statue of karma and dedicate it to people like Scotty. I laughed too. A real, deep laugh that rumbled from my chest and shook the dust off parts of me I didn't even realize were still closed. The mountains rose up ahead, steady and ancient, and the lake glittered in the distance like a promise kept. As I pulled into the dirt lot, Shannon leaned over and kissed my cheek. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but fierce. "You're not your past, Mike. You never were." I turned to her, the sun catching in her hair, making her look like she belonged to some brighter, better world. And for once, I believed her. We spent the day fishing under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Shannon caught the first fish, of course, crowing with triumph while I pretended not to sulk. Big Orange swatted lazily at the minnows near the shore, more interested in napping than hunting. Hours later, as the sun dipped low and the sky caught fire with pink and orange, we packed up and started a small bonfire by the water's edge. Shannon curled against me, her head resting on my shoulder. The flames crackled softly. The world was still. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was fighting to survive. I felt like I had arrived. I kissed her temple, breathing in the scent of her, the salt of the lake, the clean burn of wood smoke. I thought about the boy I used to be, the one who thought love had to hurt, who thought loyalty meant staying even when it broke you apart. I thought about Carol and Scotty and every scar carved into my heart, and I thought about how none of it had broken me. It had forged me into someone stronger, into someone whole. I stared into the flames and made myself a silent promise. This time, I wasn't going to waste my life trying to prove my worth to people who never deserved it. This time, I wasn't going to mistake pain for love. This time, I wasn't going to lose myself chasing someone else's idea of happiness. I already had everything I needed: a woman who saw me, a life I built with my own hands, a peace that came not from forgetting the past, but from surviving it, from owning it, from rising above it. As the last of the fire burned low and the stars came out, I pulled Shannon closer, whispering against her hair, "We're just getting started." And this time, I knew it was true. Not just a hope, a fact, because for the first time, the past wasn't chasing me. It was behind me, exactly where it belonged. And ahead of me was nothing but open sky, open road, and the life I had fought like hell to finally deserve, and I was ready for every damn second of it.